Chantal Landreville, if I pronounce her last name correctly. Wonderful, wonderful. Wait till you feel the energy from Chantal. She's great. She is her book, Raise Your Love Signal. She's a relationship coach. She started a relationship when she was just 19 with an older man, and it kind of ran its course, and it was exciting. She had a lot to learn, and then eventually, like I said, it ran its course, and she spent 10 years trying to figure out what she wants. And she was able to do that, and then date, and then eventually meet the person that she's with now in a very, very happy relationship. She just released her book, but we talk about relationships, and she has certain feelings about how the education system has really failed us as children. They never talk about having relationships and what it's like to be have successful friendship with others. The first relationship we're experienced, of course, is our parents, and she brings light to that. She also talks about this kind of triangle where, what do you want in a partner, what you think you want, and what you really want. It's very interesting a way that she describes it and how she realized that. She also talks about that the threesome in a relationship, it's your partner, yourself, and the actual relationship itself. You have to treat that as a separate entity. But really great conversation, great tricks, tools on communicating, listen actively, acknowledging, holding space. Just a really great conversation with Chantal. She's got such great energy, such great light. She took the lessons she's learned, and now she tries to help others with it. It's absolutely wonderful. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic. I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. So very excited to talk to you, Chantal Landreville. How can we all raise our love signal?
Oh, wow, we're going straight to the finish line, right? Well, one, by reading my book, that'll definitely help you. When I talk about raising your love signal through my own personal journey, I was single for just under 18 years, constantly struggling in dating and attracting non-emotional available partners all the time. And I tried a lot of different things. The good part through all of this was that I was extremely curious about personal development and just human behavior in general. So I did a lot of reading. I attended conferences, like everything you can possibly imagine about the subject, I would explore. And I would slowly start incorporating certain things to my own personal journey. And I definitely I raised my love signal to a whole other level and got amazing results. I've been in a relationship now for the last 5 years with an amazing man. And so the book literally teaches everything I've learned that took me 20 years. It's the best of all the practices that I've applied in my own personal life and that make a massive difference and that I've seen the results.
You talk about how, I believe it, age 19, you started dating somebody who's a little bit older than you, and it was good in the beginning, but then it kind of ran its course a bit. And so then you took time to create a list of what you want and kind of demands, and it took you a long time to come to this realization.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah.
So I love that you said that because, it's important to know why you're dating, and especially in the different decades that you're dating. When I look back now, I'm like, oh my God, nobody knows who they are in their 20s, right?
Absolutely.
And when I met this person, I looked up to him. They had so much to teach me. And when I started taking on more into my personality, it created friction in our relationship. Hence why I left, because this person didn't accept me for who I was. And when I decided to go through that list, because I was always an adventure seeker and I'm curious, I said, you know what? I'm going to go through this stuff, this list. And that list ended up taking me 10 years to go through. When I woke up one morning and said, okay, I've had enough. I want to meet someone serious. I want to get a little bit more serious and find my person. Well, that was almost another 10 years, 8 years to get there as well.
Describe that time a little bit more too. Were you dating during that time? Were you, what was that time like? Was it completely retrospective? Or introspective, I should say?
A little bit of both. I was dating with a purpose, meaning I was looking for a result. And I think that now, even when I work with a lot of clients, we always look for the outcome, which is not necessarily the right way to go when we're dating, right? Because we create these expectations towards people we have that we don't even know. So I was always like, okay, could this be my person? Could this be my person when I was dating? And I wouldn't pay attention to the signs or how I actually felt, or pay attention actually to my intuition, knowing this is not the right person for you. And my values and what I want, or what I think I wanted, wasn't aligned with what I was attracting and what I was sometimes settling for, because I really wanted to be like I liked that person. I thought it was the right person for me, but it wasn't. And I love to say there's a massive difference. It's the triangle effect. There's a big difference between what you think you want, what you actually attract, and then what's right for you. And we tend to stay in this zone, right? We never want to go to this zone, which is the zone that you actually want to be in. But between those two is often where there's frustration, there's disappointment. You don't understand what's happening. What am I doing wrong? Why am I attracting a certain kind of person or not? So you really have to develop your inner self introspection, really get to know who you are and why you're attracting these kinds of people, because we tend to have the same pattern. So I realized there was a reason why I was attracting constantly unemotional, available men. And when I dove deeper into my inner journey to discover why, I went deep into a special kind of therapy. I realized that, when I was 2 years old, I lost my father. So this was a subconscious belief that men that I really loved would abandon you and reject you. So it was a subconscious belief I had created to protect myself. That's why I kept attracting unemotional, available men, was because it was a way for me to stay in control. I always knew it wouldn't work out. So that was a massive eye opener. And then you're like, wow, how do I change and rewire my brain for a belief that I've had for 38, 39 years of my life? And that's where the real work starts. And I always say, awareness of why you are the way you are is 50% of the work, right? When you identify why and what my problem is, then we can decide to figure out the solution to the problem. And then applying the solution to the problem doesn't, especially when we talk about these beliefs and patterns we've had for years, they don't change overnight. And I think that's where people get a little bit discouraged or fall off the rails, is these are not things that you'll change overnight. I mean, it took me a good 6 years to finally, work on a daily basis in small baby steps to attract something different.
And Chantal, during that time when you you were attracting these unavailable men and you knew it was going to end. Did you unintentionally push them away because you knew it was going to end?
No, funny enough, it was like the push-pull method. The fact that I couldn't have them made me stay subconsciously. And I think when I look back now through all the work, and especially with how I wrote the book, I look back now saying I didn't have enough self-love for myself. I didn't have enough self-worth. I settled. I thought that I wasn't deserving of the kind of love that I really wanted to attract. So if you don't believe something yourself, how can you attract the right thing, right? So I really needed to build my self-worth and really believe that I could be in that kind of relationship that I wanted to attract before I could actually call it in. So I think it was just, again, that you're so used to this pattern that you created that you normalize it without really understanding why. And that's why I'm hoping that through this book I wrote, it's not easy work, but it's really important to understand where you're from, to understand why you're showing up. And that's rooted to childhood wounds and how we were raised, because whether we like it or not, our parents are our first love. So whether they were good, whether they were bad, whether they were there, whether they were not, it's our first example. So once you understand that and you ask yourself really great questions, you're able to see, and what that did for me was observe myself. I was able, when I started dating and knowing all this stuff, I was in a observing mode, and I would catch myself retrieving back to old patterns. But because I knew why, I could easily catch myself. And I'll give you a great example that I think a lot of people can relate to. So one of my issues being a type A personality, independent, I was used to, living life on my own. So when I finally attracted my amazing man, I had to be in a state of receiving, and I'll say the word vulnerability. So you need to be in a really healthy relationship, the kind of love that I talk about. Vulnerability is part of the game. You can't run away from it. And at the time, one of my roommates had told me, Chantal, if you can't be vulnerable with your own close friends, how do you expect to be vulnerable in relationship later on in life? And that really, it was an aha moment for me, because it really hit hard. I was like, she's absolutely right. So I decided, how can I incorporate vulnerability in every area of my life on a small scale, because it's not something that's natural to me, and start building that muscle, because that's what it is, right? When we have a belief or a pattern, it's a muscle that hasn't been worked or has been overworked in another way. In my case, zero vulnerability. So I identified a girlfriend with whom I was very comfortable with, and I shared this with her. I want to work on my vulnerability. This is what I need you to do when I will call you to share. And it was very, very uncomfortable, because I've never done that in my life. And I remember it took like a good 4 or 5 months for me to pick up the phone or go to her house and just say, okay, this is it. Like, I'm opening my heart and I'm sharing my things with you. And I had told her, I don't want you to give me advice. I don't want you to tell me what to do. I just need you to hold space for me and let me talk. And she did such a great job at it, because once I got comfortable with it, I was like, wow, this is actually really nice, being able to talk through something and not have to deal with everything on my own all the time. So which propelled me to do it with a second friend, a third friend, and then eventually even in the working space. And by the time I actually got into my relationship, it had prepared me to receive the kind of love. I'll say love, but also my man is a very old school person. So he's a provider in every shape and form. It's not just financial that I'm talking about. So it allowed me to receive that, because it could have worked against me. And I see this all the time, especially with women. We are our own worst enemy. We do not make room for men to kind of provide. And I don't care, how we've evolved, and it's things have changed and women are more independent. In a relationship between a man and a woman, there's needs to still be that balance of allowing to receive, because the DNA of a man is the DNA of a man, and the same as the woman. Even though we've evolved as society, can't take that away. And men love to provide. And again, I want to reiterate, it has nothing to do necessarily with financially. So it was a great exercise for me to do, to sit in that space. And I will still catch myself today being able to retract and going to do things on my own. But because I have that awareness, because I've worked the muscle, it's easier to catch myself and say, Chantal, no. This was the old you. You've created a community now. You know how to communicate when you're feeling feeling lonely or going through something difficult. You have people that you can actually share this with and talk this through. So does that make sense? Does that give a good example of what I was trying to explain?
Certainly does, Chantal. But to do that, to make yourself, to teach yourself how to be vulnerable by slowly introducing it to friends so you can be better at it in a relationship. I mean, that takes a lot of intention and discovery and willingness to change. I mean, that's a huge step for many people.
100%, 1,000%. And I think that's where people get stuck. That's why I always say, if you're not curious of nature, and with social media today, even though there's a lot of bad, there's such great, we have access to such great information. There's a lot out there, high quality teachers, that just are sharing. So get curious and learn about yourself, because if it's the one thing that I could tell that I'm very proud over the years, is that curiosity and being open to learning and wanting to just always better myself. I still do every day, because I don't think nobody's perfect. And I always think that I can learn something to become as a better human being. It's gotten me the results that are incredible, and living my authentic, true life, which is really, really pretty. It's really amazing to be able to be in that space. So, and don't hesitate to ask for help, because I didn't do all of it on my own. I had the curiosity to, and the willingness to learn. But like I said earlier, I attended so many conferences. I read books. I worked with coaches myself. I did therapy, so much. So I would say to people, there's a phrase that I always say that I had heard. That's a quote, and I'm going to try to remember it now. It's like, it's much easier to, the comfort of staying who you are versus the uncomfortableness of growing, but to be able to see the different results is so rewarding. And I'm not saying it at all the way in the quote, but it's like, is it better for you to stay where you are and just have this numbness and get the same results, versus getting uncomfortable a little bit? Because of course, change is it's not comfortable for people. Human beings naturally like to stay, in the same area. We don't love change, but pushing yourself to see different results. And that's why I always say with people that I work with, you have to have the willingness to really want to get out of your comfort zone and do things the way you've never explored them before.
You mentioned your triangle before, Chantal. What you attract and what you really want. How do you help people to find out what they really want in a relationship? That's got to be very difficult.
It is difficult. And funny enough, it's actually part of the first part of the book, because most people think they know what they want when they're looking for love. And it's funny, because when I do the questions, I ask, okay, describe me what you want. It's very general. And funny enough, everybody kind of wants the same thing. And I'm like, wow, that's not possible. So I think we've been taught, because we've been so rom-com and Disneyfied about what love is. We really are in love with the idea of being in love, but we don't really understand what love and being in a relationship means long-wise. So one of the things that I ask is that stop thinking what you want in a partner. What about what you want and need out of a relationship? How do I want to grow and evolve in relationship? And this is where people get stuck, because nobody actually takes the time to really think about that. I didn't even take the time to think about that back then. And when I started doing this work, I was like, wow, it's very different, because what you might think a want is for you. And I always describe this as wants are much more superficial, very self-absorbed. I want him to be 6'2". I want her to be, a great cook. I want him to be funny. I want her to, I want, where needs are almost like breath and air. They're deal breakers. They're things that you can't live without. So what that does, the clearer you get on these things, you will really focus on what matters and not get caught with all the glitz and glams and lust and passion that sometimes you will forgive certain behaviors or attitudes that are really, you would never put up with in relationship, but you swipe that stuff under the rug because, you really want to this thing to work out with the person that you think you like. So I call it develop the eagle eye vision, because as human beings, we have the 20/20 vision when you have a perfect vision, but the eagle eye has 24/7. So it's like you see the bigger picture. You really see what's happening all around you instead of just having this narrow thing and focusing on the now. So what that also does, the clearer you have that vision, you'll also be a much more effective dater instead of suffering from dating burnout. And you'll also won't settle for low vibrational matches, which we often tend to compromise ourselves, right? So the clearer you are on what you want, the less you will compromise yourself, and you will attract higher quality matches.
Just got to be willing to do the work. You, one of your posts, communication, right? Perhaps the foundation of these relationships. You have these kind of 3 steps where you're actively listening, you're acknowledging, you're holding space. Very important process with communication. Let's review it, please.
Yes,
Chantal.
I love this because, and again, what I'll share right now is not applicable to just romantic relationships. These are things that I've applied in any kind of human interaction, and that has transformed the quality of my relationships, whether it's in a workspace, in my romantic relationships, with friends. So as a human being, we're all very different, but we all tend to have the same needs, and we desire human connection, obviously. But when we communicate, which the definition of communication is the art of, having someone, the person that's in front of you, understanding what you're actually trying to communicate. But the problem is today we have very passive listening skills. We're not actively listening. We're already trying to share something, and then as the person in front of you, you're automatically starting to think, what am I going to respond? How am I going to respond? How am I going to respond? And I love to give the example. This is the best example. You go to a party or a networking event, you meet somebody new for the first time, and you introduce yourself and like, hi, my name is Chantal. And 2 seconds later, you're like, what was that person's name again? We never tend to remember people's name because our brain is already focused on the next thing to say or the other person to meet. And I don't know about you, Joe, but when I'm at events and people actually do remember my name, it always has such a tremendous impact on how important I feel. I'm like, wow, did you remembered my name? And I always tell myself, if that's how I feel by just someone remembering my name, imagine when you actually acknowledge what someone is actually saying to you or communicating to you in person. So number 1, take the time to listen actively, be present to what the person is actually sharing to you. And I always say, reciprocate this, because doesn't it feel great when you feel that someone's actually listening to you? Number 2, acknowledge what the person is saying so you actually understand. Make sure that you understand. If I understand you correctly, this is what you just shared. I'm sorry you feel this way, or I didn't realize that this is what you were going through. You kind of like acknowledge, and the person feels listened to. And at the end of the day, when you're communicating something, whether you're hurt, frustrated, you just want to feel heard, right? It's what we want. So make the person feel heard by acknowledging what you just heard. And then number 3 is focus on the solution always. Is again, so if the person has said, you know what, Joe, when you arrived late yesterday, it really made me feel unimportant because you tend to arrive late all the time. It's frustrating. It's like you don't respect my time. Joe would say, I didn't realize I was making you feel this way. I didn't know that was important for me to actually arrive on time. Solution. I will make sure next time I'm not late. Thank you for taking the time to communicate that to me. I didn't know this was something that triggered you so much. I will make sure never to be late again. And what that does is that it doesn't leave room for the tension to grow and explode, because the person's like, holy shit, this person just acknowledged what I shared. They're okay with it. They apologized. And they're like, I won't do it again.
Mm.
So it really helps to it just goes like this versus, building, exploding, developing like resentment, shutting down. You avoid people shutting down because at least people feel heard. They're like, you know what, when I actually shared what was going on, they acknowledged me and they focused on the solution. So it's a 3-step thing that works so well. And I remember I was working with a couple about a month ago. And from the beginning, they had a very, very toxic relationship. They've been in a relationship for 3 years. And this was one of the exercises that for 2 weeks, I told them, you're going to practice this every day. Every breath you take, you have to apply these 3 things. And 2 weeks later, when they came on a line, they were like big smiles. And I was like, oh, what's happening? You must have some good news to share with me. And they were like, we've never had such great 2 weeks the way we've had in our relationship, like versus the last 3 years. And it was because they acknowledged each other. They took the time to listen to what each other had to share. And they were focusing on the solution instead of blame. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. So it makes a massive difference.
It certainly does. And I've practiced this myself. What I often find is that there's assumptions being made sometimes by one of the partners to the other. They assumed you thought you knew something, or of course, I wanted Chinese food. Why didn't you know that? And I said, well, I didn't know that, or maybe it's nothing so trivial, right? Something, and so there's always that kind of assumption there. And this kind of communication tends to break that apart.
Yes. And I love that you brought that up. Assumptions, because this is our biggest problem when we communicate, is assuming the other person reads our brain. Assuming the other person should know how we're feeling, what we know, what we want. And as a person, you need to take ownership to be able to communicate what it is that you want, need, and desire, because nobody reads brains. Listen, I do this. I read people very carefully, but I certainly do not read minds. And it's if you cannot take ownership to communicate what it is that you want, need, and desire, shame on you, because your partner, you're making somebody across the table feel very uncomfortable, and it's not their own doing at all. So I love that you said that, and that creates expectations. So there's a very different conversation to have when you've actually taken the time to communicate what your needs, wants, and desires are, versus assuming the other person and expecting them to guess what it is that you want. You're only setting yourself up for disappointment and failure and resentment, and you don't want that. And we just had Valentine's Day, and I've been talking a lot about this in the last couple of weeks, because there's a lot of expectations around Valentine's Day, because, again, media just like shoves that stuff down. And I talk with a lot of people that are, frustrated because their partner didn't plan this or do that. And my first question is like, did you actually ask for what you wanted or communicated that it was important to you? And they're like, no. Well,
you should know.
Yeah. It's like, what? Why? If it's so important to you, you need to actually say so. And does it take the romance out of it? Maybe. But you know what? Why are you're just setting yourself up for frustration. So why wouldn't you want to avoid that and said, you know what? It's really important for me for you to, I don't know, send me flowers on Valentine's Day or book a dinner somewhere. I would really, really like for you to take the initiative to do that. Then the person's like, okay, I can actually plan some sort of surprise, but she told me, or he told me that, this was important and this was important. So yes, I agree that, assumptions are, please, let's stop assuming that people read our brains. Or minds, I should say, not brains.
Yeah, there's so many videos that, on Instagram, TikTok, wherever, where there's the couple, usually a young couple, and they're quiet, they're eating a meal or something, and she's, there's a narration behind her voice saying, he must know I'm upset. We haven't spoken in 20 minutes. I can't believe what's happening here. I can't believe and then, you go to the guy and he's like, I think I could wrestle an alligator. I think I could, and it's,
I actually saw that yesterday. That's funny.
And it's something completely different, and there's just no communication there, and that breaks it all down. I follow this one divorce attorney out of New York City, and he tells this one story of this one couple that's been married a long time. They're getting a divorce, and he's representing her, and it was a break in the courtroom, and he said to her, when was this relationship over? And she tells a story of how she likes this high-end granola, and it's kind of kept in one of the cupboards, and when it got low, he would replenish it. It's like a very specific, one, and he would replenish it. And, one day it wasn't replenished. So she kind of took it out to a more exposed area. Maybe he forgot, and he never replenished it. And she knew at that point the relationship was over.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like sometimes somebody gets so upset that they don't feel that the other person should be happy.
Yeah. Wow.
And
that's so, oh God, Jesus, this gets me fired up.
Does it?
Yeah, it does, because this is where it shows me how people have very high expectations of other people, and how, a relationship, and I think I'll share this. When people are in relationship, I don't think they actually understand the definition of being in a relationship. I always say a relationship is a threesome, right? It's you, your partner, and the actual relationship. The relationship has an entity of its own. And anything you do, anything you want to say, any reaction you want to have, you always have to ask yourself this question. How is my attitude? How is my, behavior? How is, what I want to say that's going to destroy the person in front of me going to show? How is it going to service the relationship? And I would say 98.5% of the time, it's like, oh, it isn't. Because we're talking out of reaction. We're talking out of ego. We're talking out of lack. We're not getting what we want, the way we want, how we want it, probably because we haven't communicated it. So, even today, for me, knowing all of this stuff, whenever I get triggered in some shape or form, this is the inner chat that I have that happens under like, a milliliter of a second. Before I respond, before it's like, how is this going to service my relationship? And I've realized it's often the ego that just surfaces. So there's a lot more power in humility and having kindness amongst each other. And there's two words that I talk about in the book, in the fundamentals, in the chapter about fundamentals to succeed in relationship. And it's kindness and thoughtfulness. And for me, kindness and thoughtfulness just automatically equates tenderness, where as this man was, that was thoughtful that he would always replenish, the cupboard, because he probably knew that was, to make her happy. This is the type of bar she wanted and whatever. But the fact that, she noticed one day after she decided to move it that it wasn't, for me, there's a component of selfish. It's just like, instead of being investigating the thing, hey, by the way, communicate, right? It's like, I noticed that you didn't take the time at this point to do what you usually do. Is there a reason for that? Is it because maybe he didn't even notice that he had changed where the stuff was, right? Maybe he was stressed at work and, his brain was on overload. So I think it's we're very demanding of other human beings, like overly demanding on human beings without taking the time to actually have that communication stuff that we just talked about, you know, sharing your wants, needs, and desires, and maybe how it made you feel that you didn't get that regular thing that you usually get. And sometimes somebody else is just going through a moment and you just need to, again, show up for the relationship, not for your self-absorbed self. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. More communication.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a friend who's been single for a while, and he describes it this way, Chantal. Tell me what you think. He says, like, I have in my mind, you know, what I believe I want. It's like when I date, do I accept only 70% of it? Do I accept only 60% of it? I realize 100% is going to be possible. Is that a good way of looking at a relationship?
Well, yes and no. But I'll take it back to what I shared earlier about creating that vision and really understanding what really matters to you. So when I had because I had created my vision, one of the things I had on my list was I wanted to be with someone that knew how to dance. I love to dance. It's a massive passion of mine. And for me, I had literally put it in a need, whereas it was a deal breaker because I was like, I could never be with someone that doesn't know how to dance. And when I met my partner, you know, the first question I asked is like, do you know how to dance? He was like, no, I'm known as like to have 2 left feet. And I'm like, oh my God, no way. And I'm like, do you have rhythm? And he's like, what do you mean? I said, okay, do you at least have a shoulder roll or something? I was desperate. Okay. And he's like, these are my moves. And I remember in my head, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. But the person I was getting to know was so kind. And for me, my values that I had written down that were, you know, how I want to grow and evolve in a relationship was someone that would accept me for who I was. I was a massive butterfly. I still am. I used to travel the world and work in the wine business before I started my business as a love coach. And, you know, very socially active in a men-dominated industry. So I couldn't be with someone that was possessive, jealous, insecure in any way. So these were things that were very important to me. So when I look at where we are in our relationship today, it's like the want or what I thought was a need that he needed to dance is not what's going to help me succeed in relationship later. It's the fact that he supports me. He actually encourages me, he'll go dancing with your girlfriends, you know, or if we're at a wedding and I'm like, I need somebody to dance with me one dance. He's like, let me have 4 shots of tequila and I'll give you one dance, right? So there's that value system that's much more important than that little want. So I would say you really need to focus what's really important to you. And that's where people get lost. And I'll say it like you said, the 70, whatever. I believe in the 80-20, where we tend to have 80% of what we have, but 20 is like meh. But in long-term relationships, we forget to remember the 80% and we're always focusing on the 20%. So it's like you need to be very selective with your partner. And I think people don't realize how important the partner selection is. And that's where, again, the vision and your authentic self, not compromising yourself, because what people pretend to be, people they're not really, or they excuse things that they wouldn't, that follows you in a relationship. And one day you wake up and you're like, I really don't like when you do this, but the person was always like that from the beginning. But then you're trying to change someone, or you're realizing that behavior that you accepted at the beginning is not acceptable anymore. So that creates, again, so make sure that you're clear on what it is that matter to you. So that's why it takes a lot of in-depth self-reflection. And it's funny, I was actually listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago about the science of relationship, like with data. And this guy was actually sharing, he's a professional matchmaker in the UK. He was actually sharing that he would sit down with people that are looking for matches and asks them to list all of their values. So for example, he was sharing that, you know, a person was Christian, loves to go to church on weekends, doesn't really consume alcohol, you know, loves to do outdoor sports. So list. They touch base a week later. So how was your weekend? What happened? Oh my God, I didn't end up going to church. I was like in a fender bender, like on the drinking all weekend, and I didn't eat well. And, so we don't walk the talk of what we think we want and say that we want because we're not aligned. And that's why they're even saying that arranged marriages have a higher success rate,
Right.
because the people that hook you up with this person are people that really know who you are. And I thought that was so fascinating. And I see it all the time when I work with clients, because what we think we want and what we attract versus what's right for us is completely different. So your friend needs to, nobody's perfect, but you need to decide what really matters to you. Like if having someone that, I don't know, I'm just saying a superficial example, that's, 6'2" is like a non-negotiable for you. I'm not saying that it's wrong or right, but you have to assume that, because if you actually insist on having somebody that's 6'2" but treats you like shit, it's like, what do you want? How do you want to be treated? How do you want to grow and evolve and have someone be there for you when, you go through a financial rut, or you lose a parent, or when you decide to raise your children? What are the value systems that you both want to agree on how you raise your children? It's crazy to see how people don't take the time to think about these things. And again, how can you show up and what can you give in a relationship? Because we're always making it about other people. But a relationship, again, is that threesome. You always need to remember how can I show up and service the relationship? And it's two people in relationship are two people that come together that have that willingness to service each other's needs, wants, and desires.
Yeah, that threesome concept is really important, isn't it? Because it's not just you and your partner, it's also the actual relationship as a separate entity, and you have to nourish that.
Yes.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, and people get very lazy in relationship. And I've noticed it myself, because I always say I love to practice what I teach. I eat a piece of my own humble pie all the time. It's very important to me to be humble in everything that I teach, because even though I teach it, I still retract to old ways sometimes. And when we met, the one thing I had said is that I don't want to be in a relationship like the average person out there. Are you ready for this? And are you ready to hold each other to high standards in our relationship? Which means it's work, it's investment. And people think that, you find your person, you sit in the lazy boy, you sit back, relax, and it's all going to work out. But it's where the real work starts. Because if you want a relationship to stay fiery, exciting, long-term, you really need to show up on a daily basis the way you do when you first start dating in the honeymoon phase. And people forget that, the person that you love and that you meet and that you choose to share a life with is the person that you were when you first started dating. But people forget to be who they are when they first started dating. That's why I always say as well, to guys or girls that are like intense on texting and just want things to happen really, really quickly, you can't sustain that in the long run. Right? So why are we doing all these straw fires? Instead, it's like build the fire solid and put like one piece of wood at a time. You don't need to reveal yourself fully right away, all of you right away. Leave some mysteriousness so you can build into that. And I see it. I've tested it in my own relationship, and I'm more in love today, 5 years in, than I was the first 2 years, funny enough, because we've built something together. And it's a really nice place to be. And we hold each other to high standards. We've been working both for the last 3 weeks because of my book launch, and he had to take on another contract. So 60 hours a week, we're just crossing paths in bed, like in and out, hi. And last week I caught myself. I was like, this is not good, because I'm a very independent. So see, this is the perfect example how I can retract to old ways. I was an avoidant attachment style. So it's easy for me to just do my own thing and I don't need you. But I felt the disconnection. So I caught myself and I'm like, no, I need to reconnect. So I told my partner, I know we're crazy busy, but we need to have a date. Like we need to have some connection time. And we both agreed to it. We booked it. We did it. And it's like, okay. So
You talk about the desire to love and to be loved is universal.
mm-hmm. Yes. So as human beings, you know, as I said earlier, we're we're all different, but we all want the same thing. And
Mm.
we definitely all want to be loved. I don't know a single human being that could live on its own, you know, 24/7 without a form of human contact and experiencing love. And let's not forget, love shows up in many, many different ways in many different areas of our life where it's not just romantic again. So we all have the desire to be loved, to be acknowledged, to be understood. We all have that. So that's why two of the questions that I ask at the beginning of the book is that you really need to understand what you want your relationship with love to be and what is your relationship to love. Because again, what we think love is that we've been conditioned to, right? It's like rom-com, Disneyfied, still until today, everything we see on TV, on in shows, it's like, you know, always the push pull, and then you finish in the romantic sunset, you know, on the white horse, and everything lives happily ever after. And that's not the way it happens.
Mm.
So we are really in love with the idea of being in love. So I ask people, let's think differently about this, especially if you want to experience a healthy, you know, happy relationship. We have to change the way we've been taught about love. And that is number one, you need to ask yourself, what does love mean to me? Like, what is it? Because if you were raised in a home, you know, that your parents were constantly screaming at each other and they had a toxic relationship, and there was a lot of verbal abuse, for example, you think that's what love is. Subconsciously, you think that's what love is. So you might tend to attract narcissistic partners. You might tend to attract people that, you know, you will naturally scream in your relationship, which is also not normal.
Mm.
So and then you might have an anxious attachment style, for example, where you're always nervous, right? You're very, very needy in a relationship because you have you think that you always have to prove yourself to get love. So you need to understand what love means to you to be able to decide how you want your relationship with love to be. And if I say my relationship with love is what I just described, that's not a nice place to be in. I don't think that's a healthy love. So I want my relationship with love to be safe. I want a relationship with love to be peaceful. I want my relationship with love to be healthy. So then that helps you understand when you work on that vision, because I keep getting back, it all comes full circle. It helps you to really understand what really matters to you and not get blindsided when you start dating again and excuse or compromise or, you know, pretend to be someone you're not.
Mm. Well said. So Chantal, I started my business in the 90s, and I was working way too hard, like you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Took on these contracts, 60 hours a week. I was not paying attention to my body, my nutrition, and I was eating late and drinking a lot of soda, etc., etc. Found myself at 340 pounds,
Wow.
and the doctor said to me, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. My daughter was just born.
Wow.
So I spent the next, 6-7 months. I lost about 130 pounds. And people always ask me how, like it's some secret, like you don't have to work at it. I want a quick answer. And I said, well, my one word answer is discipline.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I lost it.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I lost it. Focus, I got disciplined. I have this new person in my life, and I'm more than just myself. Discipline is what did it. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Chantal.
You just gave such a great example that I refer to all the time because, it's It's like anything in life that we want requires hard work and discipline. So I always give the
Mm,
example, if you want a six pack, right? If you want a six pack, unless you are naturally born with it, which is rare, you need to work at it. You need to develop the muscle. Hence what I was saying about vulnerability earlier. You need to develop the muscle, and that takes time. So you
hmm,
have to give yourself time to actually develop the muscle. And once you hit the muscle, so once you have the six pack, if you stop, the muscle is it's not gonna stay. It's
right.
not going to stay. Relationship is the same friggin' thing. The same thing. People do not want to do the work. And as you say, they do want the quick fix, right? And
Mm,
there's no
mm,
quick fix. I'm sorry to tell you this. There's absolutely no quick fix. It's not gonna happen. So it's like, do I want to experience something healthy, amazing, or do I want to stay in the shithole and constantly, be in toxic relationships where I don't feel worthy. I don't feel
mm,
great. I don't feel safe.
mm.
I'm not worthy of myself. I don't have a great relationship with myself, right? Because self-love is very important. So I love that you brought that up. And again, everything I talk about in the book, whether you do the work or not, takes time. And this is something that really opened my eyes to a whole other level as I was writing an article for 2024 dating trends. And I had to do an evaluation in the different generations because they were asking me, oh, what about Gen Z and whatever. I was like, Gen Z, my God, I have no idea. I have to start looking into this. And when I did all the research, there was a common denominator that kept on surfacing, that was whether you were 20 or 60 or 70 or 40. And this was it. It was, we have never had the desire to be and experience more in-depth human deep connections, especially since COVID. I mean, that has definitely,
Hmm.
but we are so disconnected from wanting to invest the time in our heart. People are so afraid, so fearful, rejection, abandonment, whatever the hell it might be, vulnerability, opening your heart, so afraid. And this will not happen. You cannot have deep, meaningful human connections if you do not invest the time. And I will give the perfect example. I was in a retreat in Maui in January. We were there for 3 days only, and I'm there with 8 other people that I've never met in my life. We're there. We invested the time. We created a very, very safe space. So what that created is, like, when you feel safe, you open up, you share, you're vulnerable. And I couldn't even believe how I connected with people, strangers I had never met in 3 days,
Hmm.
that I felt like, I've known for years, because we created that space. And now I have like 8 amazing other human beings in my life that, I shared some amazing times with. And that just showed me how you can create human connection by investing more time to it. And it doesn't need to be 6 months, 8 months. It's just invest the time and create a safe space. And that's where I feel that we need to take ownership if we want to experience different relationships and better quality. It starts with you. Be more attentive. Be more curious about people. Stop looking for, an outcome instead of like, or judgment or whatever, because we all have
Hmm.
our own shit. We all have baggage. Nobody's perfect. And for us to think that we are is just like crazy. But let's be more kind and give the opportunity to get to know someone.
Yeah, be more kind, give more opportunity, be more open.
Mm-hmm. Open is a key word for me. It's, if you can practice one thing, is practice being open, cultivate that. Because when we are open, we're open to receiving, we're open to learning something different, we're open to hearing something from a different way
Mm,
that we thought we knew that, was just this one-way street. Openness can be the most beautiful thing you give yourself. And openness too, if you're dating, you think you want something and you're so stuck in your ways. I have a type A, but you're
mm,
eliminating type B, C, D, E, F, G, because type A is probably, it's what you think you want, but it's not what's right for you. So
mm.
you limit yourself from discovering everything else that's out there for you. So being open for me is such a beautiful quality to cultivate, and I encourage people to 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 practice that.
Because often, especially here in the States, we see a lot of, politicizing of things, and it's just a lot of closed minds,
Hmm.
and to be open, you know, it goes along with what you said before, Chantal. You have to be vulnerable a little bit, because if you're open, you may have to suggest, hey, what I thought wasn't correct, and I'm open to another way. Given any amount of evidence, I'm specifically willing to accept anything. Perhaps I had a particular view, but now that some more evidence arrives, and now I'll look at it a bit differently. There's one way of being open, but it takes some vulnerability and some humility.
Humility is big, and vulnerability, and obviously you really have to, again, for me, this is where self-love is important. You
Mm,
respect yourself enough to actually be okay with sharing what you're thinking, asking a question, saying, I do not know, but here's how I feel, here's what I think. And that's why, again, that's creating if you feel safe, then we all leave room for people to be able to have this open conversation and focus on solutions instead of staying stuck on the problem. Look at what's happening in the world. People are staying stuck on the problem. They're not focusing on the solution. You do
mm,
not achieve anything by focusing on the problem. So it's like, what can we do to fix it? What can we do to get better at it? And as a leader, this is some of the most beautiful qualities you can have.
mm,
Instead of blaming and accusing, like, how does that
mm,
service in any shape or form?
mm.
Especially not in business, especially not in relationship, definitely not in friendships. So again, everything that we've talked about is applicable to all form of relationships.
Chantal Landreville, what motivates you?
This kind of stuff, this kind of conversation, it definitely motivates me because I see the results it creates into people when they do
Mm,
this kind of work and they absorb and change that stuff. I've
mm.
seen it myself. I'm the perfect example of my own guinea pig experience, where it's a beautiful space to be able to learn to really communicate what it is you want, need, and desire, not be afraid of taking space, of loving yourself so much that you choose you first, always, because this is how I feel and it's my authentic self. And I do not want to be surrounded by anything else that doesn't serve me in that space. So that means, having enough respect to eliminate a certain kind of behavior or person that doesn't have that same exchange. And I'm not talking about like thinking I'm the best. It's more because again, everything I talk about is reciprocating. And I've seen the difference, how everything that we've talked about, you put it into place with other human beings, how it just creates this natural kindness and healthier
Mm.
relationship. It really does. And that's what motivates me. And I want to teach this stuff in schools. I think that, if kids were taught this kind of stuff in school from a young age, they would show up differently as humans later in
Mm,
life.
mm.
It's like communication skills, emotional intelligence. They would definitely show up on a much more different way.
Yet you make a point of saying that the education system has failed at this level
Hmm.
because we're not really taught that.
No, zero. These are things that you learn with life, and we've never been taught anything about how to be in relationships. So how the hell are
Right.
we supposed to succeed? We've never really been taught what love is really all about. So hence, so love in relationships, how to communicate, how to develop your self-worth, because we all suffer. Everyone, we all have an issue of self-worth in some shape or form, and it's all related to how we were raised. So again, that level of awareness, if we were taught that from a younger age, I think back everything that, I learned, really, I dove into this kind of work like really later in life, 38, 39 years old. But if I would have learned about this stuff from a much younger age, I'm not saying that you can take life experience. You need to experience sometimes this stuff to really understand it. But it could have probably taken me, I don't know, maybe 5 years instead of 10. People would stay in relationship maybe a year instead of 20 and having kids. And, people would, leave jobs that they're not content in and to really chase their dreams instead of, settling. So, I do believe that the schooling system definitely needs to get their act together to kind of teach this stuff, because again, we're human beings, and how are we not taught human skills to navigate through the world? And we're dealing with human beings every day.
How do you measure success, Chantal?
Oh, that's a good question. How do I measure success? I think that's a very different question or answer for a lot of people. My view on success has definitely changed, especially since I started my business 3 years, where I forgot what the noise and what I should define again by society, which is often your money and being over busy. For me, success is peace of mind. It's freedom. It's freedom. I get to do what I love every single day. I get up. I'm not like, oh, I have to go to the office. I hate my job. I hate my boss. I'm like, so that freedom of choosing and getting to live the life I chose, like what I love doing. And success for me is creating change by serving other people. That's, for me, is change. I'm having an impact on making this world a better place in some shape or form, as corny as that sounds.
You are definitely having an impact, Chantal. I was so excited when we set this up. I love your work. I love the energy you bring. Your passion is there. You have a light that, you could just tell you're very genuine. You're a very genuine person. And many people will succeed at what they've done and just kind of close it and move on. Not you. You've decided to share it with others. This is the trait of a remarkable person, I believe, to not only keep it in, but now write a book, do coaching, show others, look, I did it. This is how I did it. And you can do it too. It's wonderful. And thank you so much for doing it. Anyone listening, how can we get in touch with you?
Thank you for all those kind words, by the way. I appreciate it. That's very sweet. It's a great way for me to start my day. They can reach me on my website, www.raiseyourlovesignal.com. It's also where you can buy my book that was officially released on Valentine's Day. Hence why I have a little rocky voice. I had the book launch party. That was amazing. I am most active on the social media platform Instagram, which is my name, Chantal.Landreville. But you can also find me a little bit on TikTok, on Facebook. But all my social media handles are also available on the website, so you can find me quickly over there.
Very good. We'll make sure to put links in there. I thank you so much for your time, Chantal. I hope one day, if I'm in your greater Toronto area, perhaps the four of us, your partner and mine, will all have a cup of coffee.
I would love to. Anytime. It's been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Joe.
You be well. Au revoir.
Thank you. Au revoir.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypinz.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. It's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciplined Conversations.